Now, I wanted to go ahead and put out the disclaimer, personally, when it comes down to race and politics. I personally do not like to have these type of discussions, but due to the fact that Seahawks coach Pete Carroll called out with the NFL the past week at the owners meeting, it's deemed it necessary for us to sit down and have this discussion. So Pete Carroll has been the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks for the past 12 seasons. And he's only had three defensive coordinators that have been minorities, which have been black, and no black offensive coordinators. So the NFL announced that all 32 teams must hire minority offensive assistant coach for the 2022 season. And with that, a coach can be a female or member of an ethnic or racial minority. They'll be paid from a league-wide fund. The coach must work closely with the head coach and the offensive staff with the goal of increasing minority participation in the pool of offensive coaches that eventually produces the most sought after candidates for head coaching positions. Now I'm going to go ahead and read you the quote from Pete Carroll the day after the NFL announced that they was going to NFL teams are going to have to hire offensive assistants. And it says, you could do anything but until owners get to know these candidates before the actual interviews and understand that they have to hire people who are different than them, it's not going to really change. Now, again, already read the resume of Pete Carroll, only defensive coordinator coaches, hasn't hired a offensive coordinator that was a minority. Off the top of my head, the only coach is that I can think of that's really a known for that is Andy Reid for the Kansas City Chiefs, where we have Eric Bieniemy, who's been the offensive coordinator there for the past several years and has been a top candidate for the past several years and has just not been able to get an NFL head coaching job. Pep Hamilton spent some time in the league, most recently notable for the quarterback coach 2 years ago with the Los Angeles Chargers in the development of Justin Herbert. The most recent and most popular situation currently sitting right now is probably the Brian Flores situation, which at this point is probably shedding a lot of light and giving the NFL a lot of bad attention right now. Just a quick recap of how this whole situation just went down with the whole Bill Belichick received word that the New York Giants were going to hire ex offensive coordinator Brian Dayball, ex Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator Brian Dayball, and the New York Giants was yet to interview Brian Flores, and Bill Belichick allegedly accidentally texted the wrong Brian, which he accidentally texted Brian Flores instead of Brian Dayball and got the two mixed up. And the fact that Brian Flores never had his interview with the New York Giants, he felt a certain way about it. And then that's what pushed him to file the lawsuit. Now I want to go ahead and get back to the Pete Carroll quote here, right? You can do anything but until owners get to know these candidates before the actual interview. I want to highlight that real fast because, like, when it comes down to these owners, it's a it's a comfort level. I'm not going to exactly say that all of them it comes down to them all being racist, but I really just think it just comes down to a comfort level. And we've had this conversation multiple times over the course of the over the course of this podcast that I have stated that any any line of work, any success in life, mostly, it's about it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And I experienced it first. Sat there and I've experienced it firsthand. Like, if you're not on a certain comfort level, it doesn't even matter if you're white, doesn't matter if you're black, you're just going to automatically go in that direction. Now, in this particular example, there was a there was an NFL head coach that ended up marrying somewhere into the family of someone in ownership, and that's how that particular head coach, excuse me, coaching candidate ended up getting a job. Now, in situations where we have unqualified candidates, for example, let's use Cliff Kingsbury, who had minor success in college and ended up getting the Arizona Cardinals job. Those are the kind of hires where I'm just sitting there scratching my head like there's a lot more experience and more qualified candidates. For example, I feel like Marvin Lewis deserves another opportunity in the NFL as a NFL head coach. Um, Again, Brian Flores deserves another opportunity in the NFL as a head coach. Hugh Jackson deserves another opportunity, and it's coming down to these coaches are just so desperate to get an NFL head coaching job. I don't like that word desperate. It doesn't sit well with me. We're just gonna use it. It does. They're desperate to get an opportunity. They end up taking the terrible team coaching jobs, and unfortunately, they're not able to get the amount of time for them to be successful with those teams. For example, I guess the Brian Flores situation is kind of a bad example because of the fact that they're back to back winning seasons, but unfortunately, they didn't end up making the playoffs. But Hugh Jackman's Jackson, excuse me, Hugh Jackson, his example with the Cleveland Browns, putting them on a putting them in a situation where they're on an upward trajectory, and he didn't end up carrying them because somebody else had to take over that particular situation, and he doesn't get the credit for it. Now, I agree with Pete Carroll 1000%. Like there have been some successes around the league. For example, I hate to use the Mike Tomlin example because of the fact that he inherited a good team. I believe they just came off of winning a Super Bowl. He ended up inheriting the team. So really, he was uplifted in the right situation. I got to give Bruce Arians a lot of credit for what he did for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers situation because of the fact that I can't even think of the head coach's name on the top of my head, but the situation with that was him stepping down from the head coaching position and putting Todd Bowles, which was the defensive coordinator the year prior, in a situation where he could succeed, got a team that's a playoff caliber team where he can show what he can do as a head coach. So Bruce Arians gets a lot of credit for that. But guys like Josh McCown, like he was on candidate, he was about to be a candidate Well, he was a candidate for the Houston Texans to take that job over Lovie Smith, over Brian Flores, which Josh McCown has never coached the NFL on the NFL level ever. I believe his highest level of coaching had to have been maybe high school, if I'm not mistaken. And this past year's NFL coaching search has been nothing but underwhelming candidates, if we're being honest with each other. Like Nathaniel Hackett, I didn't like that hire. Like it's a whole bunch of guys, no name guys that just flew under the radar. Like like even with the Mike McDaniel hire. I'm not the biggest fan of that hire. Even they end up throwing in the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys into the mix too as well, where honestly his resume really isn't that great. Like I believe it was like only 2 years of being an offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Previous year, he was the quarterbacks coach, and prior to that, he was the quarterback, or backup quarterback. So yeah, the whole process is a little murky, and this it is unfortunate that it comes down to the NFL having to pass a rule where you are forced to hire minority coaches on the offensive side of the football.
Nah, for the bay. Nah, for the bay. We don't care what you said. Nah, for the bay. Nah, for the bay. Nah, for the bay. We ain't hearing what you said. Nah, for the bay. Fire!